Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, and in an ill-judged moment of madness, I'm going to be discussing a Labour Party election strategy video for the second time in a week. But this time, it's with burgeoning cooperation with the Liberal Democrats. So it's really a Liberal Democrats video as well, to help people vote tactically to remove the Conservatives from power. But not just that, because we sort of knew about that. Also, how they seem to be laying the groundwork for the mythical Progressive Alliance. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So there's been a few articles around, the Financial Times, the Guardian, discussing the Labour-Lib Dem non-aggression pact. Largely from the point of view of the Liberal Democrats, actually, is how I saw it. We've already seen more open talk from the leaders of both parties that they will not stand in each other's way come the general election, with one exception. There is a seat in good old Yorkshire, which is a direct competition between Labour and the Liberal Democrats. Nothing to do with the Conservatives. They will both be fighting hard for that seat, as they both have a realistic chance of winning it. But from the point of view of removing the Tories from power, that doesn't matter to most people. Even I, as a long-time Labour supporter, so clearly partisan, especially on this matter, my priority right now is removing the Conservatives from power. That is the end of it. For a very long time, I've been a very pragmatic, someone of political interest. In my views, basically on election strategy, I understand that Labour will only ever have limited resources. The more seats you try and target, the more resources you need, or the thinner you spread your existing resources. It's really that simple. I don't just mean money when I say resources. You need strategists and campaign coordinators on the ground. You can't coordinate everything centrally. That doesn't work. Different constituents have different local issues. And the larger this army of election champions is, the more layers of management you also need to keep them focused on the key messages. So you are limited in the number of seats you can realistically target. And don't imagine that seats get flipped based on a strong local candidate and what voters see the national leader saying on the telly. All that's important. But seats are flipped because of a carefully targeted campaign which pushes the aspects of that national message that will appeal most strongly in that targeted local area. That is not to dismiss the impact of choosing a strong candidate and having an energetic local group of activists who know what they're doing campaigning. But those alone do not win you the election. That is why I keep saying that Labour cannot win a majority. Even given that it's possible that many red wall Tory seats can flip back with minimal effort, there are simply not the target seats available for Labour to win a working majority. Even strategies that try and work out how it can be done in theory rely heavily on quite a few seats being won in Scotland. It's not happening. But it is important that Labour and the Liberal Democrats don't put effort into challenging each other where the Conservatives would benefit. In fact, really no party should be doing this, but you can't have an alliance with all of them. The vast majority of target seats for both Labour and the Lib Dems are currently in Conservative hands, and also the vast majority of seats that seriously threaten the Conservatives are those challenged by Labour and the Lib Dems, so that's fine, it all works out. So what this means is that because it's a direct challenge with the Conservatives, for each seat you flip, you reduce the Conservatives' majority by 2. There are currently 360 Conservative MPs, which is already 5 down on the number after the last general election. In theory, with 650 MPs, and things can change before the next election, you need 326 to have a majority of 2. In reality, it's not that many, because the Speaker and the Deputy Speakers don't vote, so that's 4 people removed from the system. Sinn Féin do not take up their seats in Parliament, so that's another 7. So what that means is, in reality, 320 seats will work. That gives the Conservatives a 40-seat majority in real terms. So if the Conservatives lose 20 seats and Sinn Féin maintain their 7 seats at least, the Conservatives cannot guarantee winning any votes in Parliament at all. They would still likely form the government at that point. No one else realistically could. Obviously, this also assumes that the Conservatives don't gain any seats that are not currently held by them. But given that they will have been in power for over a decade, the economy will be in ruins, and swing voters are unlikely to have strong objections to the alternatives this time, that would seem fanciful to me. The Liberal Democrats have got 30 target seats. 30 seats that they have a realistic chance of winning that they are going to push very hard. This is 30 seats where the swing towards them doesn't have to be very large to win. Not very large at all. The Liberal Democrats gained 2 seats from the Conservatives in Westminster elections last year. Neither of those seats will be target seats. Both of those seats that they won last year represented really hard to win seats. They were safe Tory seats and they still fell. So it's not beyond possibility, if those 2 seats could fall, that the Liberal Democrats alone could win enough seats to remove the Conservatives' majority. Not necessarily likely. I'm not suggesting that they could win a majority of those target seats, but it's possible. If they can win even half, and they're all 30 are very winnable, then Labour would only need to, say, win 5. Well, I think there are 48 so-called red wall seats. I think it might be 47. I'm trying to think if that includes the recent defection on it. Maybe 47 now. Either way, they won't all flip back, because a small number of them may have been Labour for a long time before 2019, but they were turning blue. It'd been shifting that way for a while. It had nothing to do with Starmer, Corbyn or even Miliband before them. Like towns like Hartlepool, for example, where young professionals who mainly vote Labour were leaving the town because it was run down, lack of job opportunities, so you leave for the big cities. And what you leave behind is a disproportionate number of elderly homeowners who generally vote Conservative. But there is every likelihood that the vast majority of red wall seats flip back. So let us suppose that the Liberal Democrats take 15 of their 30 target seats. And let us say Labour win back 40 red wall seats. And that is probably on the pessimistic side. But let's say they gain nothing elsewhere as well, which is also unlikely. But what would that mean? Like just that, what would that mean? Before I go over that, I'm going to point out that there is also every chance that further gains from the SNP at least, but I'm going to focus on the tussle between the Tories, Labour and the Lib Dems here, apart from anything else. There are only a few seats the SNP have still got left to win from anyone in Scotland, so it's not going to make a huge difference, but it is possible. So what it would mean is that the Conservatives would at that point remain by far the largest party in Parliament. But it would also mean that they don't have a majority of Parliament to push anything through without doing deals with other parties. Even the DUP wouldn't be able to prop them up this time. Now, it would be messy, be a very messy hung Parliament. The Conservatives are bound to push the idea in the election campaign that only the Conservatives can possibly form a strong government, that Labour cannot win enough seats, so it's a choice between a strong Conservative government or a hung Parliament. Very messy. That would be the only truthful thing they are likely to say in the campaign. And this is why it will be important to point out that actually, do you know what? A weak hung Parliament is way better than a strong Conservative government that uses its strength against its own people. It's better than now. Doesn't remove the Tories from executive power, but it does massively limit their power because it removes their parliamentary power. It prevents them legislating for anything that would not have some cross-party support. But what if the Lib Dems won 20 of their target seats, their 30 target seats? And all of them are winnable, remember. And what if Labour won 80? The Red Wall, the vast majority of them, as well as some other seats around the country as well. That would put Labour on 278 seats, still well short of a majority, but 278 seats, to the Conservatives' 260. Labour would now be the party with the most seats. It could form a minority government. Now, for Labour, of course, that's not ideal because there'd be no realistic coalition available. The Lib Dems wouldn't have enough to join if they even wanted to, which they may not. But it would mean not only removing the Conservatives' power in Parliament, but removing them from the government as well. So they would not have control of either the executive or the legislature. Labour would be able to redefine our relationships with our international allies, which would be a lot more productive with Europe. It would also lock the door to the Treasury for Tory scroungers. But it would still be a hung Parliament where vote trading would be taking place daily. Now, my fear has always been that this makes legislation slow. The progress of reform would be so slow that Labour wouldn't impress the public. Normally, when you first come to power, after 100 days, you want to tell the public, in our first 100 days, we did this. It'd be more difficult without a majority. And that perceived slowness could mean they're out at the next election. Well, we gave you a chance. You didn't really use it. It's no good arguing, yeah, but you didn't give us a majority. Give us a majority and we'll be fine. No, that won't work because the media won't back that up. In fact, when you have a minority government, you are even vulnerable to early general elections. They can't even guarantee themselves 5 years. So I was quite pleased to see this in the articles as well, what Labour and the Lib Dems appear to be doing about that. Because so far, you may be wondering here, like I said at the start, well, what's new? We knew that they were not going to pump lots of resources into the same seats as each other. They were going to largely stay out of each other's way. They'd already announced that. But these articles now are talking about conversations between Labour and the Liberal Democrats to build relationships ahead of the general election. They're talking to each other about what happens after the election. They're getting to know each other. They're discussing common areas of interest according to reports. This is bound to include electoral reform, which is now my top policy aim, ambition, whatever you want to call it, priority, I guess. And it's absolutely bound to discuss electoral reform. It is definitely in the Lib Dems' interests, absolutely. It's in Labour's interests as well. They don't always see that, but it is in Labour's interests. Now, here's the thing. They're discussing already how they can cooperate after the general election, whatever form Parliament takes. What does that sound to you like? Because to me, that sounds like the foundations of a progressive alliance. Because that's what a progressive alliance is. It's not joining forces for an election. That's an electoral alliance. It's joining forces for a legislative programme once the balance of power has been flipped, when no party has enough seats to just drive its own agenda against the will of everyone else assembled against them. You'd think it would work on the same basis as the SNP and the Greens in Scotland, the same way as Labour implied in Wales. You know, they have agreed on a common programme of reform, but are free to disagree on things outside that arrangement, as the Scottish Greens and the SNP did recently regarding the Brexit free ports. And for those who can't understand why the Conservatives are sticking by Johnson, this is it really. Bear in mind, all it takes is for the red wall to mostly flip back. Doesn't even have to all flip back, just mostly flip back. And the Lib Dems to win some of those very winnable target seats, and the Conservatives lose power in Parliament. In fact, if Labour were to flip all of the red wall back, the Conservatives' power is gone in Parliament. No potential successor to Johnson is believed to be able to win over these working class voters in the industrial north like Johnson did. And it'll be tough for Labour and the Lib Dems to take the seats necessary to kick the Tories out of government, but it is realistic. At the moment, it looks very likely that they can kick them out of parliamentary power, and also, as things stand in the poll ratings, out of the government as well. But of course, many things can change between now and the election, not least the Conservative leader. But to take the seats necessary to remove their power in Parliament looks incredibly likely now. I said that I didn't consider the SNP in this video, but you know, they do have a good chance of taking a few of the remaining Tory seats in Scotland as well. So you have to throw that into the mix. That all adds to the equation. The seats that need taking from the Conservatives has a very good chance of happening. But if Labour and the Lib Dems can not only develop election strategies that can work together to oust the Tory from government as well, but also mean that they have a plan for the next Parliament as well, that is very good news, because it means that that legislative agenda can move more quickly than might otherwise have been the case if they find themselves there with the parliamentary arithmetic and then going, right, what do we do about it? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.